I stood at the kitchen table, holding a photograph that would destroy everything I believed in. My wife Barbara, the woman I had loved for 30 years, was hugging my younger brother Rick. Her head rested on his shoulder. Her smile was bright, intimate, and real, a smile she hadn't given me in years. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. At 67 years old, I had survived plenty of storms, corporate layoffs, health scares, financial struggles, but this photograph cut deeper than any of them. 30 years of marriage, 30 years of overtime shifts, sacrificed dreams, and quiet devotion. And this was my reward. When I confronted Barbara that evening, she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She looked me straight in the eyes and shrugged. "You shouldn't care," she said. "You were never enough for me anyway." I smiled, a cold, steady smile that made her frown. Then I handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly, her confidence fading with every second. And when she saw what was inside, she screamed, a raw, desperate scream that echoed through our empty house. But I felt nothing, because this was only the beginning of her nightmare. Let me take you back to where it all began, the night my entire world cracked open like a broken mirror. It was a rainy Thursday evening in Portland, the kind of night where the city lights blur through the raindrops on your windshield. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift at the accounting firm where I had worked for 35 years. My back ached, my eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets. But I had a plan that made me smile. Barbara had told me she would be working late at the hospital. She was a nurse, or so she claimed. I decided to surprise her with dinner at Romano's, our favorite Italian restaurant downtown, the place where I had proposed to her 3 decades ago. I arrived early, got us a corner table, and ordered a bottle of her favorite red wine. The restaurant was warm, filled with soft music and quiet conversations. I loosened my tie and waited. And waited. 30 minutes passed, then 45. I kept checking my phone, but no messages from Barbara. The waiter gave me that pitiful look, the one reserved for men who get stood up. I was about to call her when I saw them. Across the room, tucked in a booth beneath a flickering wall lamp, sat my wife. And she was not alone. My brother Rick leaned close to her, whispering something that made her laugh. Not a polite laugh, a genuine, intimate laugh I had not heard from her in years. Her hand rested on his arm, her fingers tracing small circles on his sleeve. My heart stopped. I gripped the wine glass so hard I thought it would shatter. A drop of red spilled onto the white tablecloth, spreading like blood, like the blood draining from my face.
Rick, my younger brother, the man I had bailed out of debt more times than I could count. The man who had borrowed $15,000 from me just last week, promising with those sincere eyes of his, "I'll pay you back, brother. You're the only one I can count on." And there he was, counting on my wife instead. I watched them for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Barbara's smile was radiant, alive in a way it never was with me anymore. Rick wore that expensive watch I had never seen before, probably bought with my money. His hand moved to cover hers on the table. My stomach churned. 30 years of marriage reduced to this. A secret meeting in a public restaurant, not 5 miles from our home. Then Barbara looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face, real, genuine fear. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that cold composure she had perfected over the years. She slid out of the booth, smoothing her dress, and walked toward me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Harold, what a surprise," she said, her voice too bright, too casual. I ran into Rick on my way from work. We were just catching up. Catching up. The words hung in the air like poison. Rick sauntered over, flashing his trademark grin. All teeth, no warmth. "Hey, big brother. Good to see ya. Been a while." I nodded, unable to speak. Words stuck in my throat like broken glass. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too hot, the smell of garlic mixing with the stench of betrayal. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'll let you two get back to it," I said, my voice flat. I left the wine glass behind, its red stain a silent accusation on the white cloth. Outside, the rain hit my face like cold needles. I stood on the sidewalk, letting it soak through my thin jacket. My watch had stopped, the hands frozen at 7:43. Time itself seemed to mock me. In my car, I sat motionless as rain hammered the windshield. Each drop a question I could not answer. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? Had I been blind, or had they been that good at hiding it? I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had trusted them both with my life. Now I wondered if they were planning to take it. That night, I could not sleep, so I did something I had not done in years. I sat in the dark living room and opened our old photo album. The rain had not stopped. It hammered against the roof of our Portland home like an accusation. The only light came from a small lamp in the corner, the one Barbara always complained about. She wanted something more modern, more expensive, like everything else in her life. I flipped through the pages slowly, each photograph a window into a past I was no longer sure was real.
I could not keep living in doubt, could not let this poison eat me from the inside. I needed facts, I needed evidence, I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went, and I knew exactly who could find out. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through old contacts until I found a name I had not used in years. A man who specialized in uncovering secrets. A man who could dig up truths that people wanted to stay buried. My thumb hovered over the screen. The clock ticked louder. I pressed dial. Some calls change your life forever. This was one of them. The next morning, gray light filtered through the blinds of my small office in downtown Portland. I had spent 35 years in this cramped space, balancing books and building other people's fortunes. The rain tapped against the window like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. My desk was covered with ledgers and files, but none of it mattered today. Numbers meant nothing when your entire life had become a lie. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I had not called in over a decade. Mike Sullivan, private investigator. We had met during a corporate fraud case years ago when the firm suspected an employee of embezzlement. Mike was gruff, chain-smoking, and blunt as a hammer. But he was also the sharpest man I had ever known. If anyone could uncover the truth about Barbara and Rick, it was him. I pressed dial before I could change my mind. "Sullivan?" His voice was gravel and cigarettes. "Mike, it's Harold Mitchell. I need your help." A pause, the creak of a chair. "Harold, been a long time. What's going on?" I swallowed hard. The words felt heavy on my tongue. "I need you to look into someone, discreetly. I'm listening." "My wife, Barbara." Silence stretched across the line, then a low whistle. "That's a different kind of job, Harold. You sure about this?" "I'm sure." "All right, meet me at the diner on 5th Street, 1 hour. Bring whatever you got." I hung up and stared at my phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from determination. I pulled out my wallet and removed an old photograph of Barbara, the one from happier times. Her smile looked different now, calculated, false. I slid the photo into an envelope and headed out into the rain. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease. Mike sat in a corner booth, his coat damp, a cigarette stubbed out in the ashtray beside him. He looked older than I remembered, deep lines carved into his weathered face. But his eyes were still sharp, scanning me like I was evidence at a crime scene. I slid into the seat across from him. "Spill it, Harold," he said, sipping black coffee. "What has she done?" I pushed the envelope across the table. I saw her with my brother Rick at a restaurant. Too close, too intimate. I need to know what's going on. Mike opened the envelope, glanced at the photo, and tucked it away. His expression did not change. "This kind of truth," he said slowly, "it changes a man. Sometimes breaks him. You sure you want it?" I met his eyes. "I've been living a lie for 30 years, Mike. The truth cannot be worse." He grunted, pulling out a small notepad. "Just the wife or the brother too?" The question hit me like a punch. I hesitated, thinking of all the times I had helped Rick, all the money I had lent him, all the trust I had given him. "Both," I said quietly. "I need to know everything." Mike nodded, scribbling something on his pad. "Won't be cheap, and it won't be pretty. Give me a week. I'll find whatever they're hiding." He stood, tossing a few crumpled bills on the table. "One more thing, Harold. Stay calm. Don't tip them off. Act normal. Can you do that?" I nodded. "Good. I'll be in touch." He walked out into the rain, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and burning questions. 7 days. 7 days until my worst fears would be confirmed. Or until I discovered something even darker. The truth has a weight to it, and that week I carried it everywhere I went. 7 days passed slowly. Each morning I woke up beside Barbara, pretending nothing had changed. Each night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Mike's call. Acting normal, as he had instructed, was the hardest thing I had ever done. Barbara noticed nothing. She went about her days with the same cold efficiency, the same distant smiles. She kissed my cheek each morning, a hollow gesture that now made my skin crawl. And every evening she had somewhere to be. Book club, yoga class, dinner with friends. Lies, all of it. I knew that now. On the 7th day, my phone finally rang. "Got something," Mike said. "Come to my office, now." I drove through the rain-slicked streets of Portland, my heart pounding louder with every mile. Mike's office was in a squat brick building in Old Town, the kind of place that smelled of damp paper and bad decisions. I climbed the creaky stairs to the 2nd floor and pushed open his door. The office was exactly as I remembered. Cluttered, dim, a haze of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. Mike sat behind his desk, boots propped on a wooden crate, a thin folder in his hands. He slid it across to me without a word. I opened it, and my world tilted. The first page was a typed report. Dates, times, locations. Barbara and Rick had met 3 times that week alone. Twice at a small cafe near Rick's apartment. Once at a hotel downtown. Not a cheap motel, a nice place. The kind you book when you want privacy. I turned the page. Photographs. Barbara and Rick at the cafe, sitting close, their heads almost touching. Her hand resting on his across the table. Both of them smiling like teenagers in love. Another photo, outside the hotel. Rick's arm wrapped around Barbara's waist, pulling her close. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. And another, inside Rick's car, their faces inches apart. The kind of moment that leaves no room for doubt. My chest went cold. My fingers gripped the folder so tight the edges bent. "There's more," Mike said, watching me carefully. He lit a fresh cigarette, the flame flickering in the dim light. "Your brother, Rick, he's got some dealings that don't add up. Money moving in strange directions. Could be bigger than just an affair." I looked up. "What kind of dealings?" Mike exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Still digging, but from what I can see, the IRS has been sniffing around him. Tax fraud, maybe? Unreported income, the kind of trouble that lands a man in federal prison." I looked up. "What kind of dealings?" Mike exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Still digging, but from what I can see, the IRS has been sniffing around him. Tax fraud, maybe? Unreported income, the kind of trouble that lands a man in federal prison." My mind raced. Rick had always been careless with money, always chasing the next big deal, the next sure thing. I had bailed him out more times than I could count. But fraud? That was a new level, even for him. "And Barbara?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is she involved?" Mike shrugged. "Too early to say. But they're spending a lot of time together, and not just in bedrooms. I've seen them going over documents, papers. Could be nothing, could be something." He tapped ash into a tray. "I'll keep digging, but I wanted you to see this first, so you know what you're dealing with." I closed the folder and slid it into the old envelope I had brought. The same envelope that once held love letters from Barbara. Now it held proof of her betrayal. "Find everything," I said, standing up. "I don't care what it costs. I want the full picture." Mike nodded slowly. "You got it. But Harold," he paused, his eyes hard. "Be careful. If this is what I think it is, you're not just dealing with cheaters. You're dealing with people who have something to lose. And desperate people do desperate things." I walked out into the rain, the envelope heavy in my hand. An affair was bad enough, but Mike's words echoed in my skull, cold and ominous. What were they really planning? And was I part of their scheme? You would think the first proof of betrayal would be the worst. It wasn't. The worst was still coming. 3 days after that first folder, Mike called again. His voice was tighter this time, more serious. "Harold, you need to come in," he said. "I've got more, and you're not gonna like it." The rain had eased to a steady drizzle as I drove back to that old brick building in Old Town. Portland streets glistened under the gray sky, the city moving on with its life, while mine slowly came apart at the seams. The same creaky stairs, the same dim hallway, the same peeling paint on Mike's office door. But when I stepped inside, the air felt heavier. Mike was at his desk, papers spread out in front of him, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. He did not bother with small talk this time. He just picked up a new folder and pushed it toward me. "Take a look," he said. My hands were steady as I opened it. My heart was not. More dates, more times, more meetings. This time there were 5. 2 at the same cafe, 2 at the hotel, 1 in Rick's car, parked behind a strip mall where no one was supposed to see. And then the photos. The first one hit me like a hammer. Barbara in the passenger seat of Rick's car, her hand on his, their faces close, their foreheads almost touching. She looked happy, completely, utterly happy. Another photo, the 2 of them outside the hotel entrance at night, Rick's arm wrapped possessively around her waist, Barbara leaning against him, her head tilted back in laughter. 30 years of marriage, and I could not remember the last time she had laughed like that with me. I turned the page and stopped cold. The next image was different. No hotel, no car. A small doctor's office, the kind you see in any medical building.
Rick sat in a chair in the waiting room, a file in his hands. Mike's notes were scribbled in the margin. Specialist clinic, infectious disease. My throat went dry. "What's this?" I asked. Mike leaned back, exhaling smoke. "Your brother's been visiting a specialist, more than once. I pulled some strings, got a look at a few things I probably shouldn't have seen." He tapped the folder. "Rick has a condition, something he should have disclosed to anyone he's close with." The room seemed to tilt. What kind of condition? Mike hesitated. "I can't say for sure without breaking more laws than I'm comfortable with. But from what I saw, it's serious, chronic, and contagious." I stared at the photograph of Rick in that waiting room, a file in his hands, a bored look on his face. Not fear, not shame, just impatience, like a man waiting for his car to be washed. "He knows?" I asked quietly. "Oh, he knows," Mike said. "He's known for a while, long enough to have no excuse." My mind leaped ahead of my body. "Barbara. Did you see her there?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. Mike shook his head. "Not yet, but I'm still watching. And there's more." He pulled out another sheet of paper, bank records, wire transfers, amounts that made my stomach clench. "Your brother's in deep," Mike said. "He's got money coming in from places that don't make sense. He's moving it fast. Some of it attached to accounts in your name, or at least connected to you through old loans." I felt the blood drain from my face. "In my name?" "Not directly," Mike said, "but close enough that if this blows up, the IRS is gonna start asking questions. And when they do, they're not gonna start with him. They're gonna start with the man who has the steady income, the clean record, the respectable life. Me." It all started to click into place. The constant borrowing, the promises, the charm. Rick had not just used me for money. He had used my good name as a shield for his bad behavior. "And Barbara," I managed, "where does she fit into this?"
Mike flipped to another photo. Barbara and Rick sitting at the cafe table, not touching this time. Papers spread out between them. She was pointing at something on a page. He was nodding, his expression serious. "They're not just having fun," Mike said. "They're planning. I don't know exactly what, but whatever they're doing, it's not just about passion, it's about money and leverage." For a moment, I could not speak. My wife, my brother, the two people I had trusted most in this world, not only sleeping together behind my back, but possibly building a life, a future, on top of my name, my work, my sacrifices. I closed the folder, my fingers pressing so hard into the cardboard that it almost tore. "They think I'm a fool," I said quietly. "They think I'm weak." Mike said nothing. He didn't have to. I slipped the photos and reports back into the envelope I always carried now. The same envelope that had once held Barbara's love notes, then her affair, and now something far worse, proof that they were willing to risk my freedom, my health, and my life. I stood up, my voice calm, too calm. "Keep digging, Mike. I want everything, every account, every visit, every lie." He nodded. "All right, but Harold, listen to me. You're holding dynamite. You don't toss this kind of thing lightly." I walked to the door and paused, my hand on the handle. "I know," I said, "and I'm not going to toss it." I looked back at him, my eyes hard. "I'm going to place it, very carefully." Then I stepped out into the hallway, the old floorboards creaking under my feet, the envelope heavy in my hand. They weren't just cheating. They were building their future on the ruins of my life. But what they didn't know was that I was already planning how to bring their entire world crashing down. Sometimes the quietest moments are when revenge is born. I sat alone in my car on a side street near our house, the rain tapping a slow rhythm on the windshield. The streetlights cast long reflections on the wet pavement, stretching out like the years I had wasted on people who did not deserve me. The envelope lay on the passenger seat, fat with photographs and reports, proof of every stolen moment, every whispered plan, every selfish choice. I picked it up, feeling its weight. This was no longer just about heartbreak. This was about survival, about justice. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small spiral notebook and a pen. Old habits die hard. I had spent decades organizing other people's finances, building neat columns of numbers that told the story of their lives. Now I was going to do the same with my own story, only this time the ending would be mine to write. On the first page, I wrote one word at the top in careful, steady letters: plan. Underneath, I began listing what I knew. 1. Affair. Barbara and Rick. Multiple meetings, hotel, cafe, car. 2. Medical. Rick has serious, contagious condition. Knows it, still with Barbara. 3. Money. IRS sniffing around Rick. Shady transfers, some connected to me. 4. Motive. They both benefit if I am out of the picture. I stared at that last line for a long time. Out of the picture. For years, I had wondered why Barbara stayed when she seemed so unhappy, why she complained but never left, why Rick always came to me and not some bank when you needed money. Now it was clear. I wasn't a husband or a brother to them anymore. I was an asset, a steady paycheck, a credit score, a name with no stains on it. I flipped the page and started a new list. 5. Assets: house, joint, retirement accounts, savings, insurance. 6. Risk. Rick's fraud could drag me down. Barbara could take half of everything. 7. Goal: protect myself, expose them, walk away clean. The rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed. I sat in the dim light of the dashboard, feeling something I had not felt in months: clarity. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I visited the bank. I met with a quiet, efficient young woman who had no idea she was helping dismantle a 30-year marriage. I moved what I could from our joint accounts into a separate one in my name only. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just enough to make sure I would not be left with nothing when the dust settled. After that, I called my attorney, a man I trusted from helping me draft our will years earlier. We met in his office, a tidy room filled with framed diplomas and law books. I need to protect myself, I told him, without tipping off my wife, yet. He listened, took notes, and nodded slowly. We discussed options, separate accounts, updated beneficiaries, legal steps I could take quietly, without breaking any laws, without making any sudden moves. By the time I left his office, the bones of my defense were in place. If Barbara thought she would walk away with everything, she was in for a surprise. But money was only part of it. I wanted the truth out. I wanted them to face what they had done, not in some hidden corner of a cheap motel, but in the bright, unforgiving light of a family table. That was when it came to me. Our anniversary. In 2 weeks, Barbara and I would have been married for 30 years. She had already brought it up, her tone overly cheerful. "We should do something special this year, Harold," she had said in passing. "Maybe a nice dinner at home, just family. I'll ask Rick and Diane to come." At the time, the idea had made my stomach turn. Now it made something else stir inside me. Resolve. An anniversary dinner. A celebration of a marriage that no longer existed. A perfect stage.
A perfect audience. Barbara, Rick, and Diane, my sister-in-law, as blind as I had once been. They had lied to her, too. She deserved the truth as much as I did. That evening, when Barbara went upstairs to take a bath, I sat at the kitchen table and dialed Diane's number. My hand was steady. My voice, when she answered, was calm.
"Diane, it's Harold," I said. "Barbara and I are planning a little anniversary dinner in a couple of weeks. We'd really like you to come." There was a pause on the line, just long enough for me to hear her doubt. "Is everything okay, Harold?" she asked quietly. "You sound different." "Everything's fine," I said. "I just think it's time we all sat down together, as a family." She hesitated, then agreed. After I hung up, I wrote one last word in my notebook, underlined twice: anniversary. I closed the cover and rested my hand on it. The date was set, the guests were confirmed, my finances were protected, the evidence was gathered. Now all that remained was to choose the moment when I would stop being their victim and become the man who ended their little fantasy for good. The night before our family anniversary dinner did not feel like a celebration. It felt like a test. The dining room glowed with soft candlelight, reflecting off the good china we almost never used. The table was set for two, just Barbara and me. She had insisted on a quiet evening together before the big dinner with Rick and Diane the following night. "It'll be nice to have you to myself for once," she had said, her voice sweet, her eyes carefully unreadable. I moved slowly around the room, straightening silverware, checking napkins, watching her from the corner of my eye. After everything Mike had shown me, every photograph, every report, it felt strange to stand here and pretend to be a husband celebrating 30 years of marriage. Outside, the Portland rain tapped against the windows in a soft, steady rhythm. The clock on the mantel ticked along with it, each second a reminder of how long I had played the fool. Barbara swept into the room in a burgundy dress that clung to her like a memory. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. To anyone else, she would have looked like a devoted wife, excited to mark a milestone with her husband. I knew better. "Everything looks perfect, Harold," she said, smiling as she adjusted a candle. "You really outdid yourself." Her words were smooth, but her eyes were restless, darting to the sideboard where the wine glasses waited. I watched her closely as I carried in the roast chicken and vegetables. She poured the wine, humming softly, her back turned toward me. When she thought I was not looking, her hand slipped into the pocket of her dress and came out with something small, a folded packet, pale, powdery. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. The moment felt almost calm. She held the packet low, hidden by her body, and tilted it over my glass. A faint dust drifted into the red wine, dissolving without a trace. She stirred it gently with the stem of the glass, then set it back in my place, her expression smooth, her hands steady. If I had not been looking for it, I might have missed it.
I stood in the doorway, unnoticed, holding the serving tray. Some part of me had suspected this might be where things were heading. Mike's warnings, the money, the medical condition, the sense that I was more valuable to them gone than alive. But seeing it with my own eyes was something else. Barbara turned, her smile bright again. "Come sit, Harold," she said, her voice warm. "Let's toast to us." I set the tray down and took my seat at the head of the table. She sat across from me, her eyes glittering in the candlelight. The poisoned glass waited at my right hand, dark and inviting. She lifted her own glass. "To 30 years," she said, "to everything we've built, to the life we've shared." I set the tray down and took my seat at the head of the table. She sat across from me, her eyes glittering in the candlelight. The poisoned glass waited at my right hand, dark and inviting. She lifted her own glass.
To 30 years, she said. To everything we've built. To the life we've shared. I looked at the glass in front of me, then up at her. Her fingers were tight around the stem. For the first time that evening, I saw something crack in her eyes. Fear. I picked up my glass. Her breath caught, just for a heartbeat. Then I set it gently to the side, untouched. Not thirsty tonight, I said calmly, reaching instead for the water beside my plate. Doctor's orders, you know how it is at our age. The line was simple, casual, but the effect on her was anything but. Her smile faltered, just a fraction. Her gaze flicked to the glass, then back to me. Her cheeks flushed, and her fingers began to fidget with her napkin. "Oh," she said too quickly. "Well, maybe just a sip. It's a special occasion after all." I took a slow drink of water and held her eyes over the rim of the glass. "I'm fine with water," I said. "You go ahead." She swallowed hard and took a sip of her own wine. Her hand trembled slightly. The candle flame behind her wavered, casting her face in shifting light, making her look almost like a stranger. Dinner dragged on. Every word a careful move on a chessboard. Neither of us would admit we were playing. She asked about my day. I gave vague answers. I asked about hers. She lied smoothly, talking about patients at the hospital, co-workers, errands. Not a word about Rick. Not a word about tomorrow's dinner. But every now and then, her eyes would flick to my untouched glass, sitting there between us like a silent accusation. When she rose to bring out dessert, I glanced at the clock. Almost 9. In less than 24 hours, this same room would be filled with more than candlelight and secrets. Rick would sit at this table, Diane too, and the truth would no longer belong only to me. Barbara returned with a small cake, the kind she used to bake in our early years. "I wanted tonight to feel special," she said softly. "You know, like old times." "Old times," I repeated, my voice flat. She sliced the cake, her hands shaking just enough for the knife to clink against the plate. I watched her, the way her shoulders seemed a little too stiff, the way she avoided meeting my eyes for more than a moment. Guilt, or fear, or both. We ate in near silence. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too fragile.
When the plates were finally cleared, she began gathering the glasses. Her fingers lingered near mine, hovering over the poisoned wine. "Leave it," I said gently. "I'll clean up later." She froze, then forced a smile. "If you insist." I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. For a long moment, we simply faced each other across the table. Husband and wife. Or what was left of those words. "Big night tomorrow," she said, her voice a little too high. "It'll be nice to have Rick and Diane here, like old times." There it was again. Old times. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "it will be memorable." She gave a short, brittle laugh and moved toward the doorway. "I'm going to turn in," she said. "Don't stay up too late." "I won't," I replied. When she was gone, I picked up the wine glass and held it up to the light. To anyone else, it looked perfectly normal, harmless, like our marriage had once looked from the outside. I carried it to the sink and poured it down the drain, watching the red swirl away. She had just tried to poison me, the woman I had shared a bed with for 3 decades. The woman who had pledged to love and honor me in sickness and in health. Tomorrow night, she and Rick thought they would be in control. They believed they would toast to a future built on my silence, my absence, or my grave. But I had already made my decision. The anniversary dinner would be special, all right, just not in the way they imagined. The morning after my wife tried to poison me, I went to work like nothing had happened.
The sun pushed through the clouds over downtown Portland, a rare break in the gray. People hurried along the sidewalks with coffee cups and briefcases, living their ordinary lives. I walked among them in my worn overcoat, carrying a briefcase that held anything but ordinary contents. Up in my office, I closed the door and stood for a moment in the quiet. The hum of the building's old heating system, the ticking wall clock, the faint smell of paper and ink. It was familiar, steady. For years, these four walls had been the only place I felt entirely in control. Today, that control mattered more than ever. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the envelope Mike had given me. I spread everything across the blotter: photographs of Barbara and Rick, typed reports of their meetings, notes about Rick's medical visits, hints of his financial crimes. Then I added my own notebook, the one where I had written my plan. Piece by piece, I began to build a different kind of file. Not a tax return, not a financial statement, a case. I labeled each page in neat handwriting: affair, visual evidence; meetings, dates, times, locations; medical, Rick's condition, timeline; financial, suspicious transfers, IRS interest.
I slipped each section into plastic sleeves, the way I used to organize important client documents. Old habits, careful habits. If anyone ever questioned what I was about to do, I wanted the truth to be as clear and undeniable as the numbers I had balanced my whole life. When I finished, the folder was thick, heavy, final. Next, I took out another document, a set of divorce papers my attorney had prepared. My name already signed at the bottom in blue ink. All that was missing was Barbara's signature. I slid those into a separate envelope. Not for tonight, not yet, but soon. The clock on the wall showed just past 10. The dinner was at 7. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Diane's number. For a moment, I hesitated. She was innocent in all this, at least as far as I knew, but she had been lied to, just as I had. She deserved the truth. I dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Harold?" "Hi, Diane," I said, my voice steady. "I just wanted to confirm for tonight, 7 o'clock. It's important that you're there, on time." There was a pause. I could almost hear her thinking. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. "You sound different." I looked at the open folder on my desk, at Barbara's smiling face pressed too close to Rick's in the grainy photos. "Things will make more sense after tonight," I said. "Just come, please." Another pause, then a quiet, "All right, I'll be there." After I hung up, I sat back and let out a long breath. For a man my age, breathing had become something I noticed more. The weight in my chest, the tightness in my back. But today, the strain wasn't from years. It was from knowing that by the time this day ended, nothing in my life would look the same. I gathered the photos and reports back into the folder and slid it into a plain, unmarked envelope. Not the old love letter one this time. That had served its purpose. This was something colder, cleaner. Evidence. I slipped the envelope into my briefcase, then stood and looked around the office. The framed certificate on the wall, the dent in the filing cabinet where I had once kicked it in frustration, the faded photograph of younger me standing in front of this same building, full of hope and plans. I had spent my life keeping other people honest on paper. Tonight, I would make two people face the truth in person. By late afternoon, I was back home. The house felt different now. Not like a home, more like a stage. The dining table stretched long and polished. Chairs in their places. Candles ready. Glasses lined up like props.
Barbara moved around the kitchen, humming under her breath, pretending everything was normal. She did not mention last night. Neither did I. We spoke about small things, weather, groceries, a neighbor's dog, nothing that mattered. She had no idea I had seen her slip that powder into my wine. She had no idea what was waiting in the envelope, now resting in my jacket pocket, hanging neatly on the back of a chair.
As evening edged closer, the sky darkened and the rain started again, soft at first, then heavier. The house filled with the smell of roasting meat and herbs, a comforting scent in another life. I checked the table one last time. 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, a bottle of wine in the center. My glass would stay empty. The clock on the mantel read 6:45. In 15 minutes, the doorbell would ring. My brother would walk in, confident and charming. His wife would follow, uneasy but hopeful. Barbara would greet them like a perfect hostess. They thought tonight was about celebrating 30 years of marriage. They were wrong. By nightfall, the stage would be set, the players in place, and there would be no turning back from what I was about to do. Some evenings feel ordinary from the outside, even while they are quietly tearing a life in half. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and final, like a gavel striking wood. I straightened my jacket, feeling the envelope against my chest, and walked to the door. Barbara reached it first. She opened it with a bright, practiced smile. "Rick, Diane, come in," she sang out, stepping aside to let them enter. Rick walked in like he owned the place. Tall, confident, wearing a tailored jacket I knew he couldn't afford on his own. His hair was slicked back, his smile wide. "Big brother," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Look at you, hosting a fancy dinner. What's the occasion?" He laughed like he didn't already know. I gave him a small smile. 30 years of marriage, I said. Figured it deserved a proper send-off. He chuckled, missing the edge in my words. Diane stepped in behind him, clutching her purse a little too tightly. She looked tired. The lines around her eyes were deeper than the last time I had seen her. She gave me a small, uncertain smile. "Thank you for inviting us, Harold," she said quietly. "It means a lot." "It should," I replied gently. "Your family." I watched her eyes flick toward Rick, then away. There was doubt there, pain even. I wondered how much she already suspected. Barbara closed the door and swept ahead of us into the dining room. "Come on," she said cheerfully. "Dinner's ready. I've been working on it all day." The dining room looked almost beautiful. Candles flickered in polished holders. The china gleamed. The roast sat in the center of the table, surrounded by vegetables and potatoes. If you didn't know better, you might think it was a picture of a happy family gathering. We took our seats. I sat at the head of the table, as always. Barbara to my right, Rick across from me, Diane beside him. The clock on the mantel began to chime the hour. 7 slow, measured notes. "To 30 years," Barbara said, lifting her glass, her eyes shining. "To love that lasts." Rick raised his glass too. "To Harold and Barbara," he said. "The solid ones, the steady ones. You two are what the rest of us aim for."
The hypocrisy almost made me laugh. Diane lifted her glass more slowly. Her gaze moved from her husband to me to Barbara. There was something in her expression, a tension, a question she was afraid to ask. I did not raise my glass. I folded my hands instead, resting them on the table. "To family," I said evenly, whatever that word is worth these days. Barbara's smile tightened, just a little. We began to eat. Barbara kept the conversation moving, like a hostess in a play. She asked Rick about work. He lied smoothly about new opportunities, big deals, bright futures. I watched his hands as he talked, confident, loose. No trace of the man sitting in a specialist waiting room in those photographs. Every now and then, Barbara's hand brushed his as she passed a dish, always just a bit too long, always followed by a quick glance in my direction to see if I noticed. I did. I noticed everything. Diane pushed food around her plate more than she ate. She forced a laugh here and there, but her eyes kept dropping to the tablecloth, to the silverware, to the empty space between her and her husband. Finally, as the main course plates were being cleared, Rick leaned back and grinned. "You know, Harold," he said, "you really did hit the jackpot with Barb here. 30 years. That's something. Not many guys our age can say that." I looked at him, then at Barbara. Her cheeks flushed under the candlelight. Not with pride, with nerves. "Yes," I said slowly, 30 years. A long time to share a life, a home, a bed, secrets." The last word hung in the air like smoke. Barbara's fork clanked softly against her plate. Diane's hand tightened around her napkin. Rick's grin faltered for the first time all evening. "Secrets," he said lightly. "Come on, big brother. What secrets could you possibly have?" I reached down, under the table, and slid my hand along the chair beside me. The folder I had tucked there was cool against my fingers. I had told myself to wait until dessert, but the time felt right. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound too loud in the quiet room. All eyes turned toward me. "I've spent a lot of years keeping other people's books in order," I said, my voice calm, "making sure the numbers told the truth, even when people didn't want to see it." I reached for the folder and placed it on the table. No ceremony, no drama, just a simple, plain object landing between the wine glasses and the silverware. "And," I continued, "I've never done that for my own life." Barbara let out a nervous laugh. "Harold, what are you doing?" she asked. "This is supposed to be a nice evening." "It is," I said, "for me." I flipped the folder open and tilted it. Photographs spilled out across the table, like a deck of ugly cards. They slid past the plates, past the candles, coming to rest in front of each of them.
The cafe, the hotel entrance, the car, Barbara's hand on Rick's arm around her waist, their faces close, their smiles private. For a moment, no one moved. Then Diane reached for the closest photo with trembling fingers. She stared at it, her lips parted. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. Rick's hand shot out, grabbing one from in front of him. His jaw clenched. The color drained from his face. Barbara stared, her eyes wide, her skin going pale beneath her makeup. Her hand shook so violently that her wine glass tipped, spilling red across the white tablecloth. It bled outward, staining one of the photographs. "What is this?" she whispered. "I think you know," I said quietly. She looked up at me, something like anger sparking in her eyes. "You had me followed? You spied on me?" "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I had you documented. That's different." Rick tried to bluff, as he always had. "Come on, Harold," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite make it out of his throat. You're blowing things out of proportion. It's not what it looks like." "It's not what it looks like?" Diane's voice cut through the room, sharper than any knife. She held up one of the photos with a shaking hand. "You're holding my wife outside a hotel at night, Rick. How else is it supposed to look?" He reached for her. "Diane, listen, I can explain." She pulled her hand away like his touch burned. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. Not yet. "Explain? Explain what? How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? To all of us?" Barbara pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly. "This doesn't concern you, Diane," she snapped, her voice rising.
This is between me and Harold." "Oh, it concerns her," I said sharply. "You made sure of that." Barbara turned on me. "You shouldn't care," she spat. "You haven't cared about me in years. You were always married to your job, to your numbers, to your boring little routines." I stepped closer to the table, my hands flat on the wood. "I worked those hours for you," I said quietly. "For this house, for that ring on your finger, for the vacations you wanted but never appreciated. I gave you 30 years, Barbara. Every overtime shift, every canceled dream. I gave you every piece of myself." I pointed at the photographs. "And this is what you did with it." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no quick answer. Rick sank lower in his chair, his charm stripped away. Diane stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. The room was heavy with the truth, with the wreckage of the lives they had tried to build on lies. But the photos were just the beginning. I still had one more card to play. I glanced toward my jacket hanging over the back of my chair. Inside, the envelope waited. Thicker, heavier, far more devastating than the photographs scattered across the table. The affair was out in the open now.
Next, they would learn what else their secrets had cost them. You might think exposing their affair would have been enough, but the truth had one more layer, and it was the sharpest of all. The photographs lay scattered across the table, their glossy surfaces reflecting the candlelight like broken glass. The room was silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the ragged sound of breathing. Diane stared down at the picture in her hand, her knuckles white. Rick sat frozen, his charm stripped away, his eyes darting between me, the photos, and his wife. Barbara looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her, pale, shaking, cornered. I let the silence stretch. "The affair," I said finally, my voice low, "is only part of what you've been hiding." Barbara's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, the edge of panic creeping into her tone. I reached for my jacket, draped over the back of my chair, and slid my hand into the inside pocket. My fingers closed around another envelope, this one thicker, heavier, far more dangerous than the photographs. I set it gently on the table in front of Barbara. "Open it," I said. She stared at it as if it might bite. "I'm not playing your games, Harold," she said, trying for anger and almost pulling it off. "It's not a game," I replied. "It's your life." Her eyes flicked to Rick. He looked away. Her hand moved, almost against her will. She picked up the envelope, her fingers trembling, and tore it open. A single document slid out. White paper, black print, a medical logo at the top. I watched her face as she read it. Confusion first, then disbelief, then horror. Her lips parted, the color drained from her cheeks. Her hands began to shake so violently that the paper rustled like leaves in the wind. Then she screamed. It was a raw, animal sound tearing through the quiet house, echoing off the walls. Her chair toppled backward as she lurched to her feet, the document clutched in her fist. "You knew," she choked out, spinning toward Rick. "You knew and you didn't tell me." Diane's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. Barbara shoved the paper at her, nearly shoving it into her face. "Ask him," she cried, pointing at Rick with a shaking hand. "Ask your husband what kind of disease he's been carrying around."
Diane took the document and scanned it, her eyes moving quickly over the words. I didn't need to see it again. I already knew what it said. A chronic, incurable condition, infectious, diagnosed over a year ago. Rick had sat in that specialist's waiting room, file in hand, and walked out knowing exactly what he was. And then he had gone home to his wife, and to mine. Diane's face went gray. "Rick," she whispered, "is this true?" He lifted a hand as if he could push the truth back into the envelope. "Diane, listen," he stammered. "It's not as bad as it sounds. The doctor said."
"The doctor said you have to tell your partners," I cut in, my voice hard. "That's what the report says, right there at the bottom. Patient was strongly advised to inform all current and future partners." I looked at Barbara. "Did he ever mention any of this to you?" She stared at Rick with pure hatred. "No," she said. "Never. Not once." Diane's hands began to shake. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How long have you known and still come home to me?" Rick swallowed. "About a year," he muttered. "But Diane, I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want you to overreact. I was going to handle it." She slapped him. The sound cracked through the room. His head snapped to the side, cheek reddening instantly. "You didn't want me to overreact," she cried, tears finally spilling down her face. "You put my life at risk. You put her life at risk." She pointed at Barbara without even looking at her. "You didn't want to scare us?" Barbara lunged across the table, shoving Rick's shoulder. "You disgusting coward," she spat. "You could have ruined my life." He rounded on her. "Your life?" he snapped. "You chose to be there, Barbara. You showed up. Don't pretend you're some innocent victim." "Enough," I said. The word cut through the argument like a blade. They all turned to look at me. Barbara's mascara was streaking. Diane's shoulders shook. Rick's chest heaved. "I didn't bring that report here for you to shout over it," I said quietly. "I brought it because the two of you decided my life was something you could gamble with. My health, my freedom, my name." I reached back into my jacket and pulled out a second stack of papers. This one wasn't in an envelope. It didn't need to be. Bank statements, transaction reports, notes from Mike Sullivan. I laid them out on the table, on top of the stained tablecloth, beside the photographs and the medical report. "Here's the rest of it," I said. "The fun little game you've been playing with the IRS, the shady transfers, the accounts in your name, Rick, the ones that just happen to be connected to loans from me, loans I signed for, loans that make me look awfully involved to anyone who doesn't know better." Rick's mouth fell open. "How did you get those?" "A good accountant knows how to read between the lines," I said. "And a good investigator knows where to look." I looked him dead in the eye. "Do you know what the best part is, Rick?" He didn't answer. "I don't have to decide whether to turn this in," I continued. "I already did. A week ago. Anonymous tip. All tied up with a nice little bow. They'll be knocking on your door soon enough." Diane stared at me. You turned him in?" "He turned himself in," I said, "when he decided to use my name, my history, and my money to hide his lies." Rick stood up so fast his chair toppled. "You can't do this to me," he shouted. "I'm your brother." I felt something in me go cold and clear.
"Family doesn't do this," I replied. "Family doesn't sleep with your wife. Family doesn't risk your health. Family doesn't drag your name into federal crimes." Barbara moved toward me suddenly, her hands outstretched. "Harold, please," she begged. "We can fix this. I didn't know about the illness. I didn't know about the money. It was him. It was all him." I stepped back, and she stopped short, her fingers curling in on themselves.
"You knew enough," I said. "You knew you were married. You knew he was too. You knew every time you lied to my face. Every time you left this house to go meet him. You knew when you decided to put something in my wine last night." Her eyes went wide. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you," I said. "The little packet, the way your hand moved, the way you watched my glass. You didn't just betray me, Barbara. You tried to remove me." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Rick stared at Barbara. "You what?" She shook her head wildly. I don't know what he's talking about. He's lying. He's trying to make me—" "Stop," I said. "You've lied enough for one lifetime." I reached into my pocket one last time and took out a thin manila envelope. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. She stared at it like it was poison. "What's that?" she whispered. "Our divorce papers," I said. "My lawyer drafted them. I signed them. All they need is your signature." She looked between my face and the envelope, her lips trembling. "Harold," she whispered, "we've been together for 30 years." I nodded, and for at least part of that time, I was married alone. Diane pushed her chair back slowly and stood up. She looked at me, then at Barbara, then at Rick. Something in her eyes hardened. "I'm done," she said. She pulled her wedding ring off her finger and set it on the table beside her plate. "You two can destroy each other. I'm not going down with you." She turned and walked out of the room. A moment later, we heard the front door open and slam shut. Barbara sank into her chair, the fight gone out of her. Her hands shook as she reached for the divorce envelope. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." "I already did," I said, "the moment you chose him." I picked up my jacket and slipped it on. For the first time in years, it felt like it fit. Rick stared at me, his face a mix of rage and fear. "You're going to regret this," he said. "You'll be alone. You're throwing everything away." I walked to the doorway and paused, one hand on the frame. "No," I said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm keeping something for myself." Outside, the rain was coming down harder, drumming on the roof and windows. The old clock on the mantel ticked loudly behind me, then seemed to pause just for a second, as if time itself was taking a breath. I stepped out of the dining room, leaving the photographs, the reports, the screaming, and the wreckage behind. By the time the storm passed, their lives would be in pieces.
Mine, for the first time in decades, would finally be my own. Freedom doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it comes in on the tide. 6 months after that dinner, I stood in the living room of a small apartment on the Oregon coast, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the sound of the ocean. The place wasn't much by most people's standards. 1 bedroom, simple furniture, a tiny balcony that looked out over the water. But when I opened the sliding door and stepped outside, the salty air hit my lungs like a blessing. No perfume, no lies, just the sea. Below, waves rolled in steady and patient, crashing against the rocks and pulling back again. I watched them for a long time, hands resting on the cool metal railing, the breeze tugging at my thinning gray hair. My old life felt far away. The big house in Portland, the long dining table, the stained tablecloth, the screams. They were all somewhere behind me now. Inside, on a simple wooden shelf, sat the clock that had once stopped during the worst moment of my life. I had taken it with me when I moved out, a small, stubborn piece of the past. For weeks after the divorce, it refused to run. No matter how carefully I wound it, the hands would stall, frozen between seconds. Then, one quiet morning a month ago, it started ticking again. Now, as I stepped back inside, the sound greeted me. Calm, steady, not shouting for attention, just marking time like it was supposed to. The divorce papers had been signed in a lawyer's office downtown. Barbara sat across from me, her hair a little thinner, her face harder.
She didn't cry, neither did I. We were both too tired for that. She tried one last time, of course. "We don't have to do this, Harold," she said. "We could start over." I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved more than anything, the woman who had tried to poison me instead of just leaving. "We already did," I told her. "You started over with Rick. I'm starting over without either of you." I signed my name, walked out, and did not look back. Rick had his own reckoning. The anonymous tip I sent, along with the documents Mike helped me gather, found their way into the right hands. The IRS paid him a visit, then the investigators. Last I heard, he was facing charges for fraud, tax evasion, and whatever else they could stack on top of his arrogance. His nice watch and tailored jackets couldn't help him there. As for his medical condition, that was his burden to carry, and Barbara's. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't want them. I had spent enough of my life carrying their problems. One afternoon, a little over 2 months after I moved, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Harold, it's Barbara. I need to talk, please." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some doors, once closed, should never be opened again.
Not long after, I wrote a letter to Diane. A real letter. Not an email, not a text. She deserved more than that. "Dear Diane," I wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner. I thought I was protecting myself. I didn't realize I was leaving you in the dark. You didn't deserve any of this. I hope, in time, you'll find peace and a life far away from the damage they caused." A few weeks later, a reply arrived. "Dear Harold," she wrote, "thank you for the truth. It hurt, but it set me free. I've moved back to stay with my sister for a while. I don't know what the future looks like yet, but at least I know I'm not crazy anymore. We were both lied to. We both survived. That has to count for something." I folded her letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, not because I wanted to cling to the past, but because it reminded me that telling the truth had saved more than just me. On my small dining table, a simple square one, just right for one person, lay a different kind of envelope. This one held a plane ticket. Florence, Italy. For 30 years, that city had lived only in my daydreams and travel brochures. Every time I thought about going, there was always a reason to wait. Work, money, Barbara's complaints, something. Now, there was no one left to tell me no. Next to the ticket was a worn notebook, the same one where I had written the word "plan" the night I decided to fight back. The pages at the front were filled with pain, evidence, and strategy. The pages at the back were different. "Places to see," I had written. "Things I want to learn. Photographs I want to take. Rough sketches of churches, coastlines, small villages. A list of books I wanted to read again. A reminder to finally sign up for that photography class at the community center." For decades, my life had revolved around other people's needs and expectations. Now, for the first time since I was a young man, the ledger was mine alone. I walked back to the balcony as the sun began to sink, painting the water gold and orange. The waves kept coming, rolling in and pulling back, steady as a heartbeat. I listened to them and realized something. Justice hadn't been the moment Barbara screamed at the table, or the day Rick got his visit from the agents in dark suits. Those were consequences. Necessary, maybe even satisfying. But they weren't the real victory. The real victory was this: standing here, breathing, air that didn't taste like lies. Waking up in a place where every object, every choice belonged to me. My phone buzzed once more on the table behind me. I didn't rush to check it. Whoever it was could wait. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't defined by what had been done to me. It was defined by what I chose to do next. I glanced back at the clock on the shelf. Its hands moved steadily forward,
ticking toward a future I had finally decided to claim.
In a few weeks, I would be on a plane, somewhere high above the Atlantic, heading toward a country I had only ever seen in pictures. I didn't know exactly what waited for me there, but for once, that uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like freedom. If you've ever given someone the best years of your life, you know this kind of betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. Harold didn't just lose a wife and a brother, he lost the story he thought his life was telling. 30 years of hard work, loyalty, and sacrifice were answered with lies, secret meetings, and a plan to use his good name as a shield for their bad choices. But here's the lesson buried inside all that pain. You can't always control what people do to you. Even the ones who share your blood or your bed can turn on you. What you can control is what you do once the truth shows its face. Harold could have exploded in rage. He could have lashed out, done something that would have landed him in a cell right next to his brother. Instead, he chose something quieter and much stronger. He gathered the facts, he protected his savings, he let the law deal with the crimes. And then he did the bravest thing a person in their 60s or 70s can do. He started over. He proved it is never too late to walk away from people who don't value you. Never too late to say, "This is my line," and you crossed it. Never too late to trade a big, empty house full of bad memories for a small place where your soul can finally breathe. If you've been through something like this, you're not alone. Your pain is real, but so is your power. And if you want more true stories where betrayal meets justice and ordinary people find the courage to take their lives back, stay with us. Like this video, subscribe to John's Revenge Stories, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Your story might be the next one we tell.